Well, oil prices have soared again despite historic efforts to lower them. Markets are jittery because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for a fifth of the world's oil shipments. An Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval commander posted on X that his forces would maintain the supreme leader's strategy of delivering, quote, severe blows to the aggressor by cutting off traffic through the waterway.
Iran's attacks on shipping traffic and energy infrastructure in the Gulf region aren't letting up. 2 tankers in Iraqi waters were hit overnight by Iranian boats laden with explosives. Such attacks have effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the maritime gateway from the Gulf to the rest of the oil-hungry world. Most countries have halted or drastically reduced their operations.
The oil ports closed 2 days ago. The last 2 tankers were loaded with oil and headed to a sheltered area. They're waiting for military operations to end before they can depart again.
The US, as well as Israel, also continued their strikes on Iranian military and government infrastructure. The US Central Command released these images, but did not specify where in Iran the attacks took place. Speaking to the US network CNBC, Energy Secretary Chris Wright walked back a promise that US Navy ships would escort commercial tankers through the strait.
It'll happen relatively soon, but it can't happen now. We're simply not ready. All of our military assets right now are focused on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities and the manufacturing industry that supplies their offensive capabilities.
That will do little to calm global energy markets, which saw a barrel of the benchmark Brent crude surge above $100. A day after 32 oil-consuming nations announced they would release historic levels of emergency oil reserves.
Well, more on this, we can speak now with Mark Montgomery. He's a retired Rear Admiral with the U.S. Navy and now at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us. Admiral Montgomery, U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright was forced to correct himself, saying the U.S. is not ready to escort commercial tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. What would it take for the Navy to be ready?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's 2 competing things that have to happen. They'll each take about 10 to 12 more days. One is to continue the air campaign to attrite or significantly degrade the Iranian missiles that can attack ships, drones, mines, and unmanned surface vessels that packed with explosives. Once we've removed those as a significant military risk, you can then begin convoy operations. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the actual convoy operations, which requires an overhead, unblinking eye of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. I think that exists now. The ability to place 4 to 8 aircraft in a combat air patrols over the Strait of Hormuz. We can do that, although those planes are doing something else right now. We can bring them in, and they'll be equipped with a special weapon called the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, which is a counter-drone rocket we have that at $25,000 has amazing results against the Shahed drones when used by the Ukrainians and by the U.S. Air Force. And then finally, you need attack helicopters, which we have ready to go to take out the small boats. Then finally, what you need, and this is where we don't have it yet, and I think it's another 10 to 12 days, 10 to 14 air defense capable destroyers. So like what we call the Aegis destroyer in the United States Navy, but there's British and French equivalents. If we have 10 to 14 of those, then we can properly convoy operations back and forth, from each end of the strait. So those 2 broad steps have to happen.
So you've outlined what you see as the necessary preconditions for providing naval escort for boats coming through there. Are you really confident that that can be achieved within the time frame that you're suggesting?
I believe it can be done, by week, between week 3 and 4 of this overall campaign. So 2 to 3 weeks from now. The problem we have is that's to establish the proper level of military risk. We're going to hear now the president feeling political pressure to change that and go faster. And that's my concern, is that what we can't meet is a timeline driven by the president's political risk calculations. It was good to hear the Secretary of Energy kind of walk it back and sound like it is a week to 2 weeks away, because I think that's why we had the release of the oil stowage from the European and U.S. Reserves, which was about 20 days worth of Straits of Hormuz traffic.
If the U.S. were to commit to sustained escorts under the conditions that you described, how long could the Navy maintain that tempo of operations without straining crews and support infrastructure?
Well, it will strain the overall Navy readiness. But I was part of this back in the late 1980s, and we did it for about 14 months total. So it's doable. Now, it was a less demanding environment, less ships going through, but still an Iran, kind of a revanchist Iranian regime willing to attack you. And we had not done the kind of attacks that we're doing now to lower the threat. So it's executable. It will have long-term readiness impacts on the U.S. military. And I think we would demand at some point that our European and Asian partners, in other words, Japan has Aegis destroyers, Korea has Aegis destroyers, Australia has Aegis destroyers, French and British have equivalent ships. And in fact, the Spanish have Aegis destroyers. I'm not expecting those too soon. But those can all come and assist with this.
Admiral Montgomery, what do you see as the main risks involved in providing escorts for shipping in the Gulf?
Well, I think the number one risk is mines, because as a drone, you can see it launched. As I mentioned, we have these planes, and in the end, the ships have very expensive missiles they can also use to shoot them down. Same with the small attack craft coming out. You have helicopters, you have planes, and eventually the ships. And even the cruise missiles, you have both the planes and the ships to shoot them down. Mines, on the other hand, once they get in the water, it's a very specific mine sweeping or mine hunting capability that's required. And that will slow things down dramatically. And you have to you kind of go all stop till you take care of the mine problem, and then you proceed forward.
So many say that Iran is holding back some of its arsenal, particularly drones, which it seems to have in great supply. Could they still be causing problems for escorted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through the Gulf in the months to come?
Yes, but I mean, there's a difference between problems and prohibitive effect. I don't think it will prohibit us from executing the mission. Certainly, drones getting fired out will require the planes and then the ships to shoot them down. I don't think that's, to me, the mines are probably a greater concern than the drones, but I don't want to say the drones aren't a threat. And again, if they've held back very high-end cruise missiles, that will be a problem. Although it's hard to hide a cruise missile launcher. I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine. I've been, stood next to Shaheds and lifted them up. They're very man-portable and therefore can be hidden in garages and basements. So you're right. There's an opportunity that you could see drones over the next 6-8 months.
Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.